Hi again, church family. Now, one of the biggest barriers that can make it hard, first of all, to get care and get help for ourselves, as well as to care for and help other people is the fact that sometimes we don't like grumbling or complaining, especially to or even about God. We may not like this in ourselves. We may not want to give ourselves permission to complain and to vent. And we may also not like this in other people, and we don't want to give them permission or space to complain and to vent. And this then can become a problem because the truth is, a lot of the time we aren't happy with God. There's a lot of times where we don't understand and don't like what He's doing in our life. And this is something that needs to be addressed and worked through, right? We don't want to stay in this place. We want to move beyond it. But the first step to moving beyond it is recognizing that we are in it. But a lot of times we don't do that. We just try to repress our thoughts and feelings or try to push other people to repress their thoughts and feelings. And that isn't biblical and that's not healthy. It really is just a refusal to deal with things. And when we refuse to deal with things, they don't go away. They just get pushed deeper and deeper, making it harder to deal with them. And so I want to go today to a couple places in the Bible that show us we have permission and space to grumble with God. And the first place we'll go to is the Psalms. And there are so many places we could go to in the Psalms because the most common type of psalm actually is the psalm of lament. And these are psalms in which we bring complaints to God. Happens a lot in the Psalms. A lot of places we could go to, but we'll just look at a couple. And the first place I want to go is Psalm 142, verses 1 through 2, where we read, "With my voice I cry out to the Lord. With my voice I plead for mercy to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him." And the Psalms, they are God's prayer book, his praise and worship book, and they're meant to teach us how to pray and how to worship. And here in God's book on worship, we are directly being given permission to, being given instruction in complaining to God, bringing our complaints to him. We're being shown that this should be a part of our prayer life. It's part of biblical prayer, so it should be part of our prayer to complain. This is something that is actually invited. And then also to take things one step further, let's look briefly at Psalm 88. And we could look at the whole psalm. It's all worth looking at. And I've preached on this psalm before, but we'll just single out verses 13 and 14 to give one example here. And in those verses, we read the psalmist writing, "But I, O Lord, cry to you. In the morning my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast my soul away? Why do you hide your face from me?" And in these verses, as well as the rest of this particular psalm, the writer is not just complaining to God, but he is doing a little bit of complaining about God. And in these verses, in essence, he's saying, hey, what's the deal, God? I keep praying, I keep asking you for help, but you just keep giving me the cold shoulder. And again, God includes this in the Psalms, in his officially licensed, endorsed prayer book, showing us that it is okay to pray such prayers when we need to. God actually invites us to do this. When we go to the Psalms, we see it's okay to grumble in God's presence, and even sometimes when we need to, about God and what we see happening in our lives. That's the first place I want to go, the Psalms. And then the other place is the book of Job, where we see that it's okay and good to give other people a little bit of space to grumble with God. And Job, of course, is a very big and complex book, but I'll do my best to summarize it a bit. Job, the main character of the book, is a very righteous man, the most righteous man in his generation, and he is seeking to follow God as best he can. But in spite of all of this, he suffers immensely in the book, not as a punishment. It's very clear, not as a punishment, but more as a trial of faith to see if he will keep worshiping God. And he does. He passes the test, but not without a bit of grumbling along the way. He won't curse God. He refuses to curse or deny or to denounce God, but he does complain a bit, saying, hey, what's up with this? I don't deserve this. This is awful, and I didn't do anything to bring this upon myself. But saying this, complaining about this, causes his friends, his 3 friends who are in the book, to basically freak out because they were all very religious. And so they want to start defending God. Essentially, they become apologists for God, insisting, oh, God is always right. God always does what's right. He's always just. So you must deserve all the bad things that are happening to you. It must be your fault, Job. And they say this to try to vindicate God. And while our goal here is to defend God, God himself isn't happy with this. He's not happy with the way they try to shut Job and Job's grumbling down. And so much so that God actually shows up towards the end of the book, and he says to one of Job's friends in Job chapter 42, verse 7, "My anger burns against you and against your 2 friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." And here God makes it clear, he's okay with Job's complaining. He says Job has actually spoken right, but he is not happy with these friends who were trying to, defend him, trying to defend God, but ended up shutting down Job and being callous and cruel to him in the process. We need to watch out for doing that. It's a simple fact of life that we're not always going to be happy with God. And getting that out in the open is essential for us. Something we need to do, and something we need to create space for other people to do so that we can process and move through those feelings and experiences. And the good news is God is far more comfortable with that, with our grumbling, than we may be. And of course, we're not meant to stay in this place of grumbling. Of course, God doesn't want us to go on grumbling forever. But that, in essence, is the whole point of getting it out there. We get it out there, we express it, we bring it in to God's presence. Instead of repressing it and keeping it to ourselves, we bring it into God's presence so that we can come to a place of greater understanding, or at least greater acceptance, working through these things in God's presence. He wants us to do that, so let's create some space for ourselves and other people to do a bit of grumbling with God.